Hey you guys, this is Josh.
And Carolyn.
With Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought.
This week we're talking about 7 reasons you should be homesteading.
And we're drawing on these from Joel Salatin's new book, Homestead Tsunami. If you guys haven't seen this book, you really need to check it out. We'll talk a little bit more about it. And these are the 7 of the heavies, but they're things we need to stop and think about for a moment once in a while.
You guys know us, if you've been following us for a while, you know that we're usually solutions oriented. We don't like to spend too much time poking around the problems, right? It's like, you just have to watch the news for that. You get a lot, but it is important to be aware of what's going on, aware of the heavier things, because those do give us direction, right?
They are the problems, right? If we're focused on solutions, it's because there's a problem. And there are, in probably some of these cases, past problems or potential problems that can rise again that we really need to be mindful of.
Yeah.
So anyways, this is going to be a great discussion. We're going to explore Joel's book a little bit, and we'll get to that in just a minute, though.
Yeah.
We need a little chit-chat.
A little chit-chat.
Always got to have a little chit-chat. What is going on with you this week?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, welcome to 24. I just gotta say, welcome to 24. We are here. How did that happen? I just feel like we're just saying this for 23, and yet here we are.
Something about the older you get, the faster it goes. I don't know.
I am starting to believe that is absolutely true.
It's a good thing in a lot of ways, though.
Yeah.
I think it means that we're busy, we're productive. Life is moving along, but man, it does go fast sometimes.
Time flies when you're having fun.
And working hard.
And working hard. So yeah, it's that time of year where like all the decorations down, the celebrations kind of wrapping up, although we have some birthdays this month in our house. At the time you guys are seeing this, we are gearing up for the first Thomas child wedding. And that's really exciting. So we've got a lot of that stuff going on, but that's all going to be behind us really quickly here, and we're just like in buckle down mode. This is that kind of dark days of winter, I feel like, even though the days are technically getting longer. It's cold, it's a little dreary, and it is time to buckle down, get through school, get through some of the indoor projects, and just really focus on getting some of that done for me. But I've got to tell you guys what I'm drinking, because this is something I am so absolutely in love with. This is the Hush Room Cocoa Mix from Farmhouse Teas. It has no sugar in it. And that's got to sound awful, but I actually had to call Cian and ask her over at Farmhouse Teas, was this a labeling mistake? Because it does not taste like there's no sugar in it to me. It doesn't have any like alternate sweeteners. It's just good. And the really cool part about it, though, isn't the sugar. It's that it's filled with adaptogen, mushrooms, and herbs. And so it's
healthy and good. It
is so good this time of year. It's like we're getting over the sugar high of Christmas and all of that, and you're like trying to come off of chocolate everywhere. At least
I'm missing the C's candies. They're gone.
And so I can still have some chocolate, but I don't have to have the sugar, and I can be nourishing my whole system on top of it, helping me to handle the seasonal stress of like, health issues and immune stuff. So I am so excited about this, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
We can tell.
Yeah, it's really fun.
That's good.
When you find something that works, and I don't know. I know I get excited about it. Yeah. It works, and I like it, and I want to share it with everybody. So there you go. I've shared with you now. I can just go back to enjoying.
Check out what kind of tea?
It's called Hush Room.
Hush Room.
Hush Room Cocoa.
Over at Farmhouse Teas. We'll get you a link down below.
Yeah, we will definitely do that. But what have you been up to?
Alrighty. Well, it's January, and it's what Shannon Hayes over at Sapbush Hollow Farms calls pencil pushing month. And it's true in a lot of ways. Got to be thinking about taxes. Got to be thinking about budgeting for the year. Got to be thinking about buying seeds. We're, I think, going to do another round of trees. We planted, 20-something trees last year. I think we're going to do another round here this year. Yep. So it's really planning month, getting ready for gardens, getting ready for just doing our plans while things are a little dreary, a little gray.
The projects for the year.
The projects for the year, yeah. So really getting my head into those things And it's important, you guys, to have a plan, have some goals for the year, have your big goals, have your small goals. Matter of fact, we have a pantry chat where we talk specifically about this. So we'll try to see if we can get that linked. And yeah, it's a planning month is the way I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so diving into that.
Little extra time at the desk.
That's right. We're sitting in front of the fire. Try to do some of that in the fire. Absolutely.
Ah, that's
cool.
good.
Well, hey, we got a bit to cover today and not a ton of time, so let's get to one subscriber question.
Sounds good.
We'll move on. Dixie Grissom on Wait, I freeze-dried what video? She says, I have dried cranberries but would like to freeze dry some. Do I have to poke holes in them, like for blueberries, to do it successfully?
Yeah, this is kind of a tricky thing when it comes to freeze drying. It's the same for dehydrating, as the skins of some of those berries, cherries, so think like grapes, blueberries, cranberries, cherries, something that has that nice thick skin all the way around it. That skin is very good at protecting the berries from drying out, right? That's kind of what it's doing. So if you don't break that skin in some way, you are going to cause yourself a whole lot of extra time in the freeze dryer, in the dehydrator, whichever method you're doing. So there's a couple ways of handling this. You can, one, just slice every single cranberry, a little bit time consuming. Mm-hmm. The other option, you can poke every cranberry with a needle or something like that. They actually have berry roller tools. I have one. They look like some medieval weapon of some sort. And it's like a whole lot of really sharp needly things that come off. Think of like a lint roller, but with sharp points all over it. And you roll it down like a tray of berries and poke. So they do have some ways of making that faster. The other really fast method of doing this is called checking. And that's where you essentially blanch your berries really fast. You drop them in boiling water for about 30 seconds. And that bursts the skin. And then you transfer them to cold water to cool them off so they don't continue cooking. And then you dry them off before you freeze dry or dehydrate them. That's the fast way of doing it if you want to do a whole lot all at the same time. But you do want to do one of those methods.
Very cool.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, cool.
So ready to dive into the main topic of the day.
All right, so we are taking this right from Joel Salatin's Homestead Tsunami. Really want you to check this book out, whether you are new to homesteading, whether you're a seasoned homesteader. This book is eye-opening, it's inspiring, it's encouraging, and yet it's calling us to action. It's calling us to think real, and so we're diving into a little bit of the heavies. Most of this book is actually like on all the positives, and maybe we'll do another section at some time. But we do need to realize there are things that, and we've realized in this last few years, that things come up that we wouldn't expect to experience in our society. Yeah. And I think the reality is that more of these things are possible. And so there's some things to keep in the back of our mind. Okay. At the moment, in the front of our mind. Yeah. So 7 reasons. Okay. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's get into them. Now, just to be clear, I haven't read this book yet. It's been on your bookshelf, or on your nightstand.
And I've been reading it.
So as soon as you're done, I'm going to grab it and read it. So I'm very excited about this.
Absolutely. And this is coming from chapter 5 in stashing and stockpiling. Okay. And it's a list of things of possibles that people face over time, and reasons why we want to be prepared and why we want to be living prepared the homesteading life. Yeah. And in these times. And so number 1, it's a biggie, and it's war.
Ooh, yeah, we're seeing that, around the globe now, and we're walking into a season where we're seeing that happen again.
Yeah, and because we haven't experienced it in a big way in so long, we forget the realities. We don't know. Most of our generation doesn't understand. And Joel says here, nothing stresses food inventories like war. In America, we haven't fought, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, inside our borders since 1865. We really don't know the implications, and yet we're getting to a world where more and more we see Ukraine, we see Israel. I think most of us understand the potential implications and the challenges that could come. And Joel gives us a good reminder. The Romans felt impregnable. They felt like they could never fail until they weren't. And so I think that's the point right there that we have to remember. It's not like this isn't war fear-mongering. The war is a reality of civilizations powerful civilizations feeling impregnable is a reality, us getting comfortable is a reality, and understanding that things can change, and that war will probably come again. And I'm not making a prediction, neither is Joel, about tomorrow or this year or anything,
right?
But it is a reality, and so it's something to remember that we can face those challenges. The homesteading life is an answer to that, living prepared.
Yeah, that's very good. I think of the BBC TV show, what is it, Wartime Farm and Kitchen? It might be something like that. But that's an older series.
One.
Well, there's also Wartime Farm is another one. And, you know, they all give a little bit of a picture of what happens with the food. You know, look back at the historical, what has happened food-wise in nations, and what people have to do to deal with it. So it's a good thing to be aware of and realize that it changes life really quickly. Just trying to deal with the food aspect of war.
Well, and resources, even if it's not on our soil, you know, World War II, we had issues.
Yeah.
Europe had issues with food and food production. Of course, you remember I can't think of the exact, there's a lot of signs and the victory gardens and a lot of things encouraging people. So let's get proactive.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
Okay, number 2. Civil unrest, just short of war or armed conflict. This happens from time to time. He gives an example of the Canadian trucker strike in 2021. That's a pretty mild case, but civil unrest is another disruptor that can, and when we're looking at, and especially in our country, a more and more fractionalized political system and process, that becomes more and more of a real possibility.
Yeah, we start seeing rumblings of that. You know, we've seen them in the last few years.
Seattle in, was that 2020 or 2021?
Yeah, you start seeing little bits and go, wow, this could go bad really quickly. And, you know, the reality is I hate to say it this way, but we just really don't have a moral people anymore.
We have moral degradation in our culture, and that leads to problems, and that leads to when people get afraid, whatever the reason is, or they get deeply unhappy with their government, you end up with civil unrest. That disrupts all kinds of things.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah.
Okay,
that was number 2. Number 3, lockdowns.
Yeah, who thinks you're going to see that again? I do, actually. I think that was a trial run.
Well, in January of 2020, if you would have said, if I would have gone to a friend, anybody I know, and said, sometime in the next couple months, most of the United States is going to be locked down and be convinced to stay in their homes, not go to work, not travel. And in fact, it's going to happen all over the world.
Oh.
Anybody would have laughed and said, that's not possible. It's especially not possible in the United States of America. And yet, we know what happened. And we went through what we now call COVID. And I agree with you. That was a test run. That was just the beginning. It's coming again, whatever the reason is. And I think we all understand very well the disruption that caused. And that's been a big motivator for a lot of people, which is great. But we're getting removed from it, and I see people kind of getting relaxed, getting a little like, you know, not so worried about it. Those seeds are down in the basement. I'll get them if I need them, right? The beans, Band-Aids, and bullets mentality. I'll just stockpile it. We need to live prepared.
Yeah, and I think you and I have heard a lot of people, a lot of homesteaders, people who have been developing their homesteads, start saying things like, you know, I'm just not going to do so much next year. It's a lot of work. I think I'm going to relax a little. And I think it's really important to point out, we're looking at maybe the calm before the storm. Like, we haven't just gotten through the storm, whatever the storm is. We're in a situation where we're kind of in, society's degrading in a lot of places. It is going to continue to get less stable any way you look at it. I don't look at any sector of our society and go, oh wow, that's just really getting more stable. Like that's we're going to really depend on that, as you know, whether we're talking medicine, morality, families, government
institutions,
all of it,
fiscal
education,
responsibility,
finances, all of it is like, this doesn't look so good.
Well, and it's and again, it's not to be a harbinger of doom, but civilizations go through a historical pattern, and that's a whole nother discussion, but it is a reality, it is a truth that all civilization go through a historical pattern, and we are on the downside of that historical pattern. With that, all civilizations, when I did research for the School of Traditional Skills, there is record back to the Roman Empire and even to Mesopotamia of people going back to, they didn't call it homesteading, but going back to the land, going back to rural communities, and shoring themselves up and beginning to live prepared. So it is a reality, and civil unrest is a little hard to imagine in America, but it can come. And when people get very, very dissatisfied, enough of them, it happens, and it disrupts things, whatever level it is.
Yeah.
And along with lockdowns, sorry, we were already on the lockdowns, but that's a new one in our mentality, lockdowns in the American psyche, but it's a reality, and I agree, it's probably coming again. Here's another one we really take for granted, and that is the grid, and grid breakdown specifically, and the possibility of our grid, whether it's a failure on the inside because it's so fragile and so flip of a switch and so dependent on code, or whether it is some sort of intentional attack against it, we can't go very long as a society grid down, or large sections of grid down.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, does anybody else think it's absolutely crazy that we keep channeling more and more things to electric? Now we're electric vehicles, right? The big push is electric vehicles. And yet we're already dealing with rolling blackouts in the middle of summer because we're already overloading our grid to the point where we're having to shut things down. And yet we're channeling more and more things onto this same grid that's already proving that it's weak and not able to handle what it is we're throwing at it at this point. So I think that becomes, grid down, maybe we're talking major grid down. That's definitely a scenario. But I think we all have to be absolutely prepared for the fact that our grid's not going to continue being as stable because of over demand.
And that's actually the bigger reality. Regional grid down, brownouts, blackouts. We are not producing, we don't have a system that's producing enough electricity to keep up with the increased demand for all of these things. That is a reality. And so it's reality that electricity is going to get more expensive, way more expensive in the coming decade or two. And there's going to be service issues without war, without some of the other things that could affect the fragility of the system. And so getting prepared for that is really, really important. I don't think that necessarily means going wholly off grid, that you need to freak out and go spend $30,000, $50,000, $80,000 on an off-grid solar system, but you can start building resiliency to deal with that.
Yeah, and we actually have a whole pantry chat where we talk about some of the, I think we called it the lies of going off-grid. Off-grid lies. And so that would be a really good one to listen to if you're interested more in that topic, because you do have to go into that with your eyes wide open.
And there are lots of things that, without going totally off grid, in fact staying on grid, where you can create a system where you've got backups for power from a month to a year, and not necessarily with going off grid. Just being prepared and having backups, just like you'd have in your pantry, like you'd have in your barn if you've got animals, extra feed stored, all your supplies. You can do that with electricity. Number 5 is sabotage. Shortly after 9/11, the agriculture media carried numerous reports about sabotage vulnerability and how to make sure your farm was not susceptible. Our food and water system can be easily poisoned. Is one. Our transportation system, again, our grid system, all of these things can disrupt our food supply.
Yeah, I think we were just watching the Epic Times has the No Food, No Farmers, I think is what it's called. A show on there, and we were watching that, and they were referring to how much of our farmland is now owned by China. Big companies in China owning the farmland, and how easy it would be to shut down some of our major food systems in our country because, somebody who looks like they're politically enemies of ours, I don't know if we say that, I don't think we quite acknowledge that yet politically
we
out
should.
loud, but I think we all kind of know that in rumblings, that they're owning a lot of our farmland and a lot of our food production systems, and that's kind of a scary thing.
And we can get on the trail of that shouldn't be, because it shouldn't be, and get really upset. That's a different subject.
Right.
It is reality, and that's just one. You control the food, you can control people. We have our own concerns from large corporate control of the food supply.
Yeah.
That they can turn a switch and, sabotage the food system intentionally to control people. So there's a lot of reasons where sabotage can come in, and it's one it's fairly unimaginable to us in our society, but it's one we need to understand is a potential reality.
But I think it's also good to be aware that, this is actually happening on some small scale right now. There have been so many fires and disasters in food processing plants across the country. Now, are those all proven to be sabotage? No. Probably not. I don't know. You don't hear the follow-up news on these things. But you start looking at patterns of things that are happening. Maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist. I probably am. But I'm also looking at patterns and going, that doesn't seem likely.
Well, it's one of the beautiful things about the information age and that I love about technology. There can be a lot of proliferation of bad information, certainly.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot more good information, and there's a lot more validity and understanding to the realities that there are different forces at work that can affect our systems. Besides the random ones, there are potentially intentional ones.
Yeah.
And it's good to be living aware and preparing for that.
Absolutely.
Number 6 is disease. This is another one that we kind of go, I think even with COVID, a lot of people think, oh, that was manufactured, that was whatever. Whatever COVID was, the point is not to argue whether it was or was not. Disease can affect us, and we think that we're so sophisticated in this world that we're conquering most of them, and that to truly have something, and even COVID got overblown, right? It didn't do the damage they said it was going to do.
Right.
And that makes us go, oh, that couldn't really happen.
Yeah.
Disease is a part of human history, and we are not above it. We are not past it, even though we have areas of our medical system that fight it well and that have contained a lot of it as far as a lot of the world goes. We can still have disasters that arise out of disease.
We're actually heading towards more disasters because of some of the ways we've handled things with the medical system. Antibiotic resistance is a major, major problem.
Yeah.
And it is creeping up and it is taking over. And, right now we're still kind of hush, hush, hush. It's not making big news, but it is killing. I was just reading. It's moving towards one of the top killers in the United States already. And we don't really have great answers for it. We've already kind of outrun our own medical system.
Well, the medical system doesn't really want you to understand that fact is a product of other areas of our medical system.
Yeah, and the agriculture system.
Unintentionally, I would say, hopefully creating these, resistant type bacteria and other things that, we're not going to be able to fight.
Yeah, there is actually evidence too that I've been seeing that some of the vaccine things and some of the things that we've said, we're not going to deal with that again. We've kind of eradicated, vaccines are working. They've actually mutated beyond the vaccines. And so we're starting to have problems with things coming back out that we haven't seen before. So we do have to be aware that just because we have our modern medical system doesn't mean we're in the clear and we can handle all these things and they're just not going to be a widespread problem anymore. It's not likely.
I'd say just like breakdown, like war, things that we haven't experienced a lot, we think we're immune to, but civilizations, eventually the cycle happens and one or more of these things comes back around. Finally, number 7, and that is environmental disaster. His example here is Hurricane Katrina. Yeah. And, we're really not that equipped, and it happens regionally. So as a nation, I don't think we always grasp some of the effects of some of these events if you're not in the region.
Right.
But we actually aren't able to handle them well, and I don't even fault the government for that. Natural disasters are natural disasters.
Right.
And they, cause destruction and they cause problems.
Yeah.
And just about anywhere you live, there is some potentiality for one form of natural or environmental disaster. And that's not even with going into some of the things that we're causing.
Right.
I'd say that we're causing potential environmental disaster the way we farm, by the way we've destroyed the soil, the way we chemicalize it, the watershed, what that does. I think that is an environmental disaster on a large scale coming. And so that would be a man-made one that I think is out in the future. But they're a reality that we're often kind of, if you haven't just lived through something in your region, a little like, yeah, that could never happen here.
Yeah. I think in general, you know, a lot of what we're seeing here and a lot of what he's talking about in his 7 reasons is we may not be as stable as we've been used to being. Our future maybe doesn't look quite as stable as maybe the most recent 50 years, 100 years of our history has looked. And it's something that we need to come to terms with and be ready to deal with.
That is very well said, that it's something we need to come to terms with, and it's the point of talking about these things, because every culture gets successful, or every successful major empire culture gets successful, we get comfortable,
right,
and we think we've got it all under control, and we're padded because our systems work well, we're fairly wealthy as a nation, as a people, and you just think these things can't happen, and the reality is they do happen. They happen in historical cycles. We're in one of those cycles, and it's important to be aware of these things, not to go walk in fear, not to freak out at the news, but to be informed, to better understand what are the possible realities of these things and how do we respond to them? How do we address them? And I think in part of Joel's whole point in the book, which again is mostly positive, so I don't want to shed the book in a negative light, because I think it's very important that he brings these things out, but he spends most of the time drawing on the positives and the solutions, as we try to do here at Homesteading Family, and say, these are motivators. These are things that get us thinking and go, you know what, yeah, I do need to take that seriously. I don't need to walk in fear, but I do need to take it that these are all weaknesses that we are not really used to dealing with, and that we need to respond appropriately, which we would say is living a homesteading life, living a prepared life.
Yeah, absolutely. And the benefits of homesteading and of living in this way really answer a lot of the concerns here.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's something we should get into in another pantry chat, is really talking about the benefits of homesteading and how it answers the concerns of what we're seeing in a destabilized society.
Yeah.
But I think that's a bigger topic than we can tackle today.
Well, and it's a great idea, and he definitely dives in deep here. So check out Homestead Tsunami and get that on your nightstand or whenever your reading time is, and we'll talk about maybe opening some of those up, whether it's out of the book or our own ideas.
Great idea.
Here in the near future.
Yeah, and in the meantime, make sure you're doing your planning, you're taking a look at how prepared you are, what systems you have that are maybe weak or need to be worked on a little bit this year, and start putting it into your year plan to get in a little bit more stable situation so you can weather whatever storm it is that comes your way.
Little bits at a time.
Yep.
1%, 1% little leaps.
There you go.
Can get you there.
Guys, it's been great getting to hang out with you, and we'll see you real soon.
Absolutely. See you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.